These are very pragmatic men, men who believe that market economics is the key to this. Here's what John Howard said to Davos only a year ago. The biggest thing the developed world can do to alleviate world poverty is to remove trade barriers. That was his key message to Davos in 2005. That's the sort of thing you'll hear from them.
Yeah, well, you know, I was at the same Davos as the Prime Minister, and I don't disagree with him in that doing trade with a continent like Africa is what the Africans would like, but we have to make it fairer, the trade rules. So right now, you know, we flood their markets with our cheap goods, but we don't let them put their cheap goods on our supermarket shelves. And this is not a charity issue. This is a justice issue. You know, right now there's, whatever it is, 5,500 Africans dying every day of a preventable, treatable disease, AIDS. And people say, that's a great cause. We say, that's not a cause. That's an emergency. Or 3,000 Africans, again, who die of a mosquito bite. Malaria kills mostly children, 3,000 of them a day. And I say, that's not a cause. That's an emergency. And yes, we need fairer trade rules. The Prime Minister is not wrong there, and entrepreneurial capitalism has a role to play. But some of these people are too sick and too ill and too weakened by their circumstance to even get on the lowest rung of the ladder in the free market.
It's an interesting thing, because what seems to be happening right now is that the issue of global poverty, while it's there in the movement that you're talking about, has slipped somewhat off the agenda at the G20 talks that are happening, at least according to the way Peter Costello reads the agenda. I mean, he's talking about energy security being on top, global warming alongside that. Global poverty doesn't seem to be at the top of the list anymore.
Yeah, it's number 5. Funnily enough, at the next G8, which will be in Germany, it's in the top 2. And again, the movement in Germany carried the day there. We worked with them on that, and Angela Merkel is taking this very seriously. The reason why these issues should be at the top of any such meetings I think, is beyond just that it's the right thing to do to serve the poor when you're in a position of power. It's, as I said earlier, it's the strategic thing to do. It's the smart thing to do. That's why Angela Merkel's looking. That's why Bush and Blair and Chirac are looking at it. Everybody knows that the order of things right now is not working for most people who live on the planet, and that some adjustments to that order should be made to use our technology, our pharmaceuticals, for the service of most of the people who need them. Because if we don't, there's a sense that that order is crumbling, and there's a hostile environment in the wider world is not good for anyone. So that's why I would say to the hard-headed, tough-nut politicians that you've got here in Australia, that there is a connection between the war against terror and the war against poverty. And I didn't say that. A 5-star general said that. Colin Powell said, you cannot win the war against terror without winning the war against poverty. We all know there were rich, Saudis that plotted 9/11 in the United States and, may have been part of the Bali bombings. But these groups depend on their support from the kind of chaos of, failed states that we saw in Afghanistan and now all over Africa. This is just the smart thing to do. And so on a pragmatic, tough-nutted point of view, I still think it should be higher up the list in priorities.
Let's go right back to the situation here in Australia. Now, you mentioned the fact, and Peter Costello said this last night, the 0.7% of GDP is a total of aid. That's aspirational. He's talking about doubling Australian aid by 2010. That would still only take it up to, I think, 0.38, which is just over halfway there to the goal that you're talking about reaching by 2015. So what would you say about this aspiration versus necessity?
It's not an aspiration. It was a promise made, and it's been made several times by this government. I think just to expect people to deliver on a promise is not too much. I have to be a little careful here, because I I can't tell. I feel it not incumbent upon me to berate Australia about its commitment to 0.7. I can tell you that Australia is in the top 2 most generous peoples on earth as far as private philanthropy is concerned. Ireland is number 1, by the way. I think if Australians understand that the money won't be misspent, that there's a new era of aid, that there's real value for money, that millions of lives will be transformed, and that in these dangerous times, more importantly, the way they see us will be transformed, and that might be smart. That's all I just would stick to that tune, and I'm sure, I have confidence that Australians want this if they believe it can be effective.
A final question, and it is on the new debates that are now emerging about aid itself, because what you hear from the donor countries is that one of the real, from the country's real problems with the way aid is being dispensed is that the donor countries are doling it out to their own companies to go and work in these places, and it's not actually reaching, in many cases, the people on the ground who need it most. That's certainly a criticism being made of Australian aid in this region.
Yeah, there has been a review of aid and the way it's doled out, and there are some countries who are more guilty of what's known as tithe aid, where you tithe a percentage of the money, but actually most of it gets spent on, say, Australian corporations or consultants and things like that. And yeah, there is work to do in tidying that up. But the thing about aid, what does it accomplish? That was the thing I used to always get in Washington, D.C. and in Berlin, for instance. What does aid accomplish? Let me say this. I've just been back to Africa. Since the Drop the Debt movement, 15 million more children are going to school in Africa. That is a remarkable thing. That's what a social movement can cause, can bring about, which is so inspiring. 15 million more children going to school in Africa because of that. And that's only the first half of debt cancellation. There's more to come. So I would be encouraged, and I would encourage Australia just to lead us. We look up to you, and I come as a fan, not a critic. And thank you for listening to me and for having the patience to listen to me. I really appreciate it.
Bono, we thank you very much for taking the time to come and talk to us tonight on Lateline.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, Tony.